friends, this video is going to be on how we can factor a trinomial uh, that doesn't have all four terms we need to have in order to group it. So far we've seen how to factor something with four terms by grouping it into the first two terms and finding a common factor, and then grouping it into the second two terms and finding a common factor. But here we have not four terms, not a lovely polynomial with four terms, but we have a trinomial with three terms. So the secret here is all about the b term, right? Because if you'll recall, when we multiply binomials, something happens here with this middle term, right? We get two values that both have a linear term, and they get combined, right? Combined to be that middle term. Which means that the first step that we need to do in order to factor a trinomial is to figure out if there's some way to uncombine that middle term. So just a couple of things to always be on the lookout for when you're working with factoring. First, always check for a GCF first. So I'm going to look at these three terms and see if they have anything in common other than 1. And b squared, 13b, and 36 do not have anything in common other than 1. So there is no GCF, but I checked for it, so I'm good to move on. Now the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to note, and I've already noted that this is a trinomial, so I'm going to have to do something about that b term. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the little product and sums trick that we have been talking about in class, right? I'm going to find the two numbers that multiplied together give me the product, right, of my first term and my last term. So the product will be positive 36b squared. Right? So in other words, I'm looking for two factors, so I make kind of a factor tree. And I want the two products of that will sum up to my b value. So they want the sum of them needs to be 13b. Okay, so products of a times c and sums to b. Okay. All right, and so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just try some factors of 36b squared. So, well, that could be 1b times 36b, but that will not, in fact, give me 13b, right? So then I can try again. So that doesn't work. So again, I'm looking for the ones that add up. So 1 times 36, 36 times 1, they're both positive, so they have to both be positive. So how about 2b and 18b? Well, that's getting closer, 20b, but that is still not 13b. So let's try again. So we're going to get, how about 3? Does 3 go? So 3b times 12b. Oh, closer yet, right? That's 15b, but still not quite there. So let's try something else. How about 4? 4b. 4 times 9 gives me 36. So look at that. 4b plus 9b is equal to 36, and the factors hold true because 4b times 9b gives me positive 36b squared. Notice that I'm really keeping track of the signs, and that's going to be a big hint when I sort of start to focus on. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this. I'm going to take these factors. Actually, I probably wanted to make those green again. I'm going to take these two factors here. I know that the 13b came from combining my 4b and my 9b, because those are the two values that multiplied together gave me positive 36b squared, and added up together gave me 13b. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to uncombine them. Okay. So now I'm going to write out my polynomial with four terms. I'm just going to bring down the first term, b squared, plus, and instead of 13b, I'm going to break it up. I'm going to break it up into 4b plus 9b. and then I'll bring down the 36, right, straight from above. So what I've done was I've just taken this 13b and I've broken it into the two terms that were combined originally. Now I can go ahead and do some grouping, right? So I have b squared plus 4b is my first group, plus my second binomial is 9b plus 36. And then from there, I can start to look for some common factors. So there is a common factor of this first pair, which is b, leaving me b plus 4. And then there's a common factor of the second term, which is 9, which if I factor out 9b divided by 9 is b, and 36 divided by 9 is 4. So I get my factors here, b plus 4, which is that common binomial factor, and what's left behind if I factor that b plus 4 out is b plus 9. So here are my two factors, b plus 4 times b plus 9, that gave me b squared plus 13b plus 36. Okay, so again, just I'm going to sort of see if I can shrink this, sort of move this over a little bit so it's not in our way for the that a little smaller. Okay, so this was just the scratch basically that we used. So again, we were products and sums. So let's try another problem. Okay, so problem number 2. Notice some differences, right? Whenever we tackle a new problem, always take a second to sort of reflect on the problem. So maybe you've already noticed that there seems to be like a value here, whereas over here it was just 1 was the coefficient. And maybe you've noticed that that value might be common to all of these things, which reminds us that we have to check to see if we can factor out a GCF first, right? So that reminds us about that. And then maybe you've also noticed that we've got some lovely negative signs going on, whereas here we had plus signs happening. So here we're subtracting. So that might have something to do with it as well. So, okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and see what we're going to do to tackle this problem. So first, GCF. Well, we feel suspicious that this one might have a GCF, and indeed, we could factor a 4 out of this, which leaves me with x squared minus x minus 6. And so now I'm going to continue like I had over here, except I'm going to sort of ignore the 4 for now, right? Like the 4 is sort of outside of my problem for now. So I'm just going to sort of focus on what's inside my parentheses. So I'm going to go on to my products and sums. So product and sums for what's inside the parentheses. So the product will be the first and last terms, and the sum will be the b value, right? A times c sums to b. So if I multiply x squared and negative 6, it's negative 6x squared, right? Has to be what my factors are going to add up. And I have a bad habit here of writing this too close to the side, so I don't have room for my sums. So I'm going to scooch that over. And now I'm looking for the two things that add up to my central term, which is negative, and I can think of that as negative 1x, just if that helps me sort of think of the value. So, and again, that's sums, products, and let's think of some factors. Now, this one's a negative 6, right, or a negative 6x, so I must have multiplied a positive times a negative, or a negative times a positive, right? The signs must be different here when I multiply them in order to give me a negative result. So if I start with some factors, I could think of maybe negative 1, right, times positive 6. But that would give me positive 5x, so that's not going to work. I could think of maybe negative 6x and positive 1x, but then that's negative 5, so that still doesn't work. Other factors, things that multiply to 6. So I could have negative 2x plus 3x, which gives me positive 1x, but I'm starting to think that I might be on the right path here. So that's positive 1x, but I need it to be negative 1x. So how about positive 2x plus negative 3x? Does that equal negative 1x? And indeed that one does. So there we go. I've identified my two terms that I can break that middle linear term up into. So again, the 4 is going to, I don't have a disappearing ray for mathematics, so I can't make it go away, but I can kind of hold on to it outside here, outside the parentheses. And now I'm going to split this term up in here. So I'm going to have x squared. Instead of negative x, I'm going to have plus 2x minus 3x minus 6. Hopefully someone is right now in their head asking themselves, would it matter if I put the negative 3x first and the positive 2x next? And it will work out as well. It might be actually quite fun to try it and see what you get. And you'll hopefully notice that you can change them around. It doesn't have to be in any particular order. Okay, but having said that, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to group, right? So I've already started sort of this process. So now I've got 4x, and what's inside here, I'm going to think of this as x squared plus 2x. And now here I've got minus 3x minus 6, but I want to be really careful because I always want to make sure I'm adding my two binomials. So in order to make this an addition problem, right, instead of a subtraction problem, I'm going to actually switch this over to adding a negative, right, because subtraction is the same as adding a negative. So if I think of this as adding a negative, so now I've got adding a negative 3x minus 6. That makes sure that I don't have to think about distributing the minus sign in a way that would be complicated. So just make it an addition problem, and things will work out with signs much simpler. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and see what these first two terms have in common, and they have an x in common, so that leaves me with x plus 2 inside those parentheses. And then looking at the second parentheses, I've got negative 3 in common, which leaves me with an x plus 2. And so now my common binomial is x plus 2, and the remaining part is x plus negative 3 or x minus 3. And so there we have the factored form of 4x squared minus 4x minus 24. If you had forgotten to factor out the 4 at the beginning, you would still end up with a 4 inside of one of these parentheses. So you might have like 4x plus 8 times x minus 3, or you might have 4x minus 12 times x plus 2. And that would not be fully factored. That would be a partially factored term, which is just, we like to have our prime factors so we know what all the pieces are. All right, great. So I hope that helps, and I hope that we have an opportunity to dig further into some of these lovely factoring problems as we move forward.